Hi, I would like to talk about Bleedbow Glad. So, since patch notes came out, Bleedbow Glad got, and not just Glad, just Bleedbow got way more attention than it had before. And what bothers me is that the last time most people played Bleedbow Glad, or Champion, or Deadeye, was back when it was really good. So back in Delirium, Harvest, and Ritual. And seeing so many people on PoE Ninja and like streamers and stuff like talk about it and do some experiments with how to do this, how to do that. I'm really worried about how just hear me out. How bad people are at Bleedbow Glad. And just Bleedbow. I'm sorry for saying Bleedbow Glad. I just have a gladiator of my head brain. I'm sorry. I'm sick in the head. So I would like to talk about most important things of this build, as well as I'm sorry if the record is lagging, because my PC is actually dying. So I would like to go through most important things about Bleedbow Glad that people often do wrong, because I think that it's important for me as a person who plays Bleed for 3 years, so since Delirium, I only play Bleed, almost only Bleed. And I feel like if I can do something about it and make people know, then yeah. So, okay, the rant is over. Let's begin with the first thing. Ascendancy. What do you pick? So, there isn't that much difference between Champion and Gladiator, except for survivability. So, Champion is tanky, but he's slower. Because even if you go for haste with Divine Blessing, or just Val Haste, it still won't compensate for the perma challenge charges when you kill monsters, which play a huge role for both movement speed and attack speed to roll higher damage bleeds. So the answer is pretty simple. If you want to be tanky and not really care about your on-hit survivability, then you go for Champion. And if you're okay with being more slow. But if you are okay with occasionally dying before you get main survivability option, which is Zibakwa and this mastery, which I'll talk about later, and if you know how to farm quickly, as just farm quickly currency so that you can buy it on trade, then you go Glad. Important thing: do not go Glad on hardcore. Bleedbow Glad is unplayable hardcore, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so that out of the way. About leveling. How do you level this if let's say you decided to league start it? So, first things first, I must warn you that league starting Bleedbow Glad is cock and bull torture. So, it's not a very good thing to do. But if you're determined to do so, then it is still possible, but it has to go through, you know, different weird stuff. So first, you'd probably level either as Glad or as Champion, depending on the strategy you'll choose, which I'll talk about a few minutes later. So the best skill to level it with is Sunder. It's literally the best melee skill for Bleed. So some of you who know Lacerate or Bladestorm might ask, but why? Or like Earthquake. So the reason for that is that Sunder's base damage, which is 325 at the max level, as well as that it does not depend on flat damage, makes it better than Lacerate, which has both lower damage because it depends on physical flat damage. It depends on stance switching, as well as it has lower base damage and attack speed. Wait, I think I said attack speed. So basically, it's worse in every aspect than Sunder up until very late game, which you don't really care about, because it's about leveling, you know. So that's the first thing. Second thing, why not better than Bladestorm? Because as some of you might know, Bladestorm is actually better than Lacerate, except for bossing, but it's not what bothers us. So, clearing the Bladestorm is better because it scales really well with attack speed, since Blades the frequency of the damage that those blade storms you make deal damage is dependent on your attack speed. So attack speed is actually way more useful on blade storm because it scales both your clearing and your single target damage for better bleed rolls. And so the problem with blade storm is that first, if you equip it right away, which is Act 3 after you kill Gratuitous, you will experience insane mental pain, degradation, and rotting of your neurons. It's that bad, which is why I gotta play Sunder. And you can actually switch to Blade Storm in Act 6 or 7, especially after you go through second lab and get Explosion, if you level as a Glad. And so, here comes the thing. Champion Adrenaline Abuse is OP for leveling. Which is why, after a lot of tests I did, and I actually league started it, Bleed Sunder with Adrenaline Abuse as a champion without going for the second lab is very strong. Let's talk about it. So first, you take Sunder in Act 3, which is Chance to Bleed, Ruthless, and Sunder. So you deal a lot of damage both up close and at a distance, because the last and the first shockwave deal 100% damage, and the middle shockwaves, which it travels with, they deal only 50% of damage, or 40, which is really helpful with claiming packs, because you can apply multiple bleeds to a same pack of monsters. With Explosion, when you're already at maps, it's very useful, but when you're fighting a boss, you either have to be right in its face or stand far away without attacking constantly, which actually makes you play it like Blade Storm, that you have to stay right inside a boss. But it also allows you to have a better clear because you're not dependent on the speed of the Blade Storm, as well as it has more damage and more attack speed. So it's basically better in almost every aspect. So if you're okay with abusing adrenaline all the time, with like weapon swapping, then do this. It's a very smooth and fast leveling process. You get a lot of damage and attack speed from abusing that strat, as well as you can skip the second lab, which saves you a lot of time, especially on League Start. But when you get to Act 10, you'll have to do 2 labs. You'll have to do second lab, where you unspec your 2 nodes of adrenaline, which will be 10 respec points, and then you do the third lab, and then you have 3 double points. So basically you get the 3 abilities, which are Blade Explosion and Arena Challenger. But that time you need to have enough mana reservation from Mana Mastery and from the wheel right here, so that you can fit in Blood and Sand, because it's really important for you to have an uptime for challenge charges. So with leveling out of the way, let's talk about how do we get to Bleedable Glad, because you don't really spec anywhere near like when you start mapping. The moment you actually spec is about red maps, when you got some currency. So as I said, Bleed Bow is not league startable on hardcore, and especially SSF, because hardcore is because of the survivability of this build, and SSF is because of the gear requirements of this build. So when you get to red maps, which when you're already like set up 2-3 void stones perfectly, let's say you don't buy any services and you've set up 2 void stones, which is Exarch and Eater, because Sunder cannot really do Maven or Uber Elder. And so you've done it, and you have a somewhat good sustain of red maps, which allows you to level. So you have 2 options. If you're in softcore, oh wait, we're talking about softcore, never mind. So you can go on lower tier maps and farm currency for Bleedable Glad, or get very shitty Bleedable Glad gear, but still stay on lower tier maps and farm currency with Essence, Expedition, stuff like that, you know? Just being very strong and just not leveling, but earning a lot of currency. The second thing you can do is that if you manage to earn a lot of currency while getting to that Bleedable Glad point, you can actually fully spec into Bleedable Glad with Decent Bow, and Decent Bow is at least 450 physical DPS with a physical damage over time multiplier modifier, which you need from Syndicate Unveils. It's very important because it gives you a lot of damage early on. So then you can actually play it like normally. You can just go to your red maps and just chill. So yeah, that's about transferring mostly. There's a lot of small things, but I'm not sure that I have to talk about. I'll just montage it in if not montage, but edit it in if I'll think it's important if I miss something. So let's talk about Bleed Boglad itself. So as we finish speaking, as I finish speaking about how do you spec into it, what mistakes do people actually make when they're playing the Bleed Boglad or Champion Bleed Bow? So the very first thing is clearing skill. Many good players like Quantric, Ben, I'm not sure has Exile. Was it Exile or Steel? I'm not sure. Okay. So one of them was also making. Oh, it was Steel. Steel was making a list of builds, and so most of these players that actually like a good game and they're making the build, they are making one of the two mistakes. First one is clearing skill. So they most often go for Rain of Arrows. And hear me out, but Rain of Arrows early on sucks complete ass. Why does it, you might ask? Well, let's begin with Bleed Bow characters barely having any damage early on. They are literally glass cannons that are only capable of puncturing and just running around like a clown. And that's what I'm talking about. The thing I'm talking about is Split Arrow, which has twice more damage than Rain of Arrows. We're not considering the mod on the bow yet, because it's unrealistic to get on a League Start. So you deal twice less damage than a Split Arrow, as well as you do not have a range advantage. Because the biggest thing about Bleed Bow characters is that Split Arrow, like here, you can see that I'm standing here and I don't have to go anywhere close monsters, which are like 2 screens away, and I can still kill them, which is probably the biggest thing about survivability on this type of characters. Rain of Arrows does not allow you to do that. Yes, you can shoot at the edge of your screen, but you cannot off screen, which puts you in more danger than with Split Arrow. So, okay, what's the second thing you might ask? Chain versus Pierce and Fork. Oh my god, this thing actually drives me crazy. Like, how can you actually... Wait, let me turn on the screen share. How can you actually think that this is better than this? So if you're actually preparing for Bleed Boglad switch, you already have at least level 15 Pierce, which is already better than Chain. But some of you might say, oh my god, Chain is more mobile, it can chain to enemies where Pierce cannot. It does not matter. Chain runs out of its clearing capabilities way faster than Pierce does. And what's even more infuriating, that people on trade who play Bleed Bow are not using Anomalous Pierce, which gives 6 additional targets of piercing, which is 3 times more than a normal chain. And even Fork, like, if you don't want to go Pierce, just go Chain. Do not go Fork. Fork is so outrageously bad for Bleed Bow, because you need to apply as many bleeds as you can to enemies so that they explode efficiently. And Fork must be the worst skill for that, because it just shoots them out in random directions, right? So, with support gem stuff out of the way, and skill gem, let's talk about bows. So, a mistake that I often see other people do with their bows is that they go for Elder or Hunter base for the physical damage over time multiplier for bleeding, right? or stuff like that. And I must say that for the cost you have to pay to make these bows, they are not worth it. Why? Especially Gladiator gets a lot of multipliers of damage. Moving, this multiplier, more against main targets, faster damage with clusters, it's Vasting Affliction, you get faster here. If you have the really good Timeless Jewel, you get even faster here. You have multiplier from Assailum for every stage. You have Cruelty. If you use Divergent Chance to Bleed, you get even more. And you have so many damage multipliers that the most important thing you miss is flat damage. And all those mods for physical damage or time multiplier or for bleeding is a prefix. And as we know, prefix is flat damage. So you basically give up flat damage, which has more value than damage over time, especially considering that you'll have to pay more or waste more time to craft a decent bow with that multiplier. Saying up ahead for people who will check in POBs, yes, you get more damage from a multiplier. The only twist is that crafting it is so horrendously more difficult than a usual flat damage bow, which anyway outscales later because you get more multipliers than you get flat damage for a bleed bow, that it is not worth it to craft that bow just for a short while before you anyway switch it for a better flat bow, which is easier to craft. So with that, oh, and about fracture. Fractures are just simply better than influence because you can get some fracture, especially in trade like this one, right? And boom, bada bing, bada boom, it's easy GG noobs. So about bows. Next, let's talk about Asylum versus Snipe support. To get it straight out of the way, Snipe support is worse than Asylum damage-wise. You lose approximately 15 to 20% of the damage with Puncture. And you have to charge for less, especially if you are not using the enchantment in your helmet. But you lose damage. If you have 2 more charges, which is I think the maximum amount of charges you can get as an enchantment and helmet, it might be 1. But you basically almost catch up with Asylum, but not really. Asylum is still best for damage. But if you're playing on hardcore, or you're just a invincibility enjoyer, then going for double sixling is better because helmet slot allows you to get way more tankiness than Asylum gives you. So you can go for suppression, you can go for Eldritch mods that convert damage, you can go for mana reservation efficiency and stuff like that. So if you don't really care about damage that much, you go for double sixling. If you really like damage and you can't be bothered messing around with the helmet and doing all these shenanigans, go for Asylum. Now, I must mention that in the very late game base setup, Asylum is still better. Why? As you can see, in all my sockets, I still need more sockets, which is this unset ring, which I got very lucky with. You might ask, but how come those other people don't really have that much socket pressure as I do? Right? So I really like building a character tanky enough to map comfortably, but not as tanky as hardcore players. So what I do is I have normal cast when damage taken with Molten Shell. I have my Ensnaring Arrow, Mirage Archer, Flame Dash, and Vuln. Even though I Vuln on hit, the stronger Vuln is not getting overridden by the Vuln on hit. Then I have a 6-link in my bow, I have a 4-link in my helmet, and I have a 6-link in my body armor for auras. Yes, you probably won't have Malevolence or Pride. Well, basically Malevolence is better for mapping and Pride is better for bossing, but still. You probably won't have one of these 50% auras, which will save you 1 more slot. But you still aren't able to fit in even Mana Forge plus Frenzy, which leads to the next point. This build is so starved on sockets that going for double 6-link is actually shooting yourself into a wee-wee. It's actually that bad. So I would never ever recommend to anyone to go for a snipe skill, except if you don't have a helmet, if you have no way to access it. So it's like SSF, hardcore SSF, anything like that, like limited league, like chat SF that Steel is doing. If you're unable to access Assailum, go for snipe skill. And you want to play the Bleedbow Glad or Bleedbow Champion, you go for snipe. But in 10 out of 10, okay, 9 out of 10 moments, when you have Assailum, you have to take it because it's that much better. Even though you could get a lot of mana reservation efficiency. So with the helmet out of the way, let's talk about defenses, right? So what are the defenses? So as you saw, I have arrogance plus vitality, because even though we have leech, the leech amount is not big enough for it to be a reliable source of recovery. As well as, even though I run double flask, as you can see here, I just switch it, but I use mana flask so that I can run no leech and no regen maps. So even though you have double life flask, since there's nothing else to put in, regen is still good. So if you look here, I have 600 regen, and I don't even have this node taken, which I was taking previously. Because if you take this node, you have almost 1,000 regen per second, which is insanely much. And so it's a very big quality of life, especially for like burning ground when you farm Exarch. And so this is one of the most like usual way of form of defenses is recovery. Next, we are pretty stacked in armor. We're using iron reflexes to convert all our evasion into armor, as well as we're using Zibakwa. And I don't think there's any point in setting up Divine Flesh without this. Because as far as I remember, you get only like 5 or 7% of max hit for elemental damage if you just take this with maximum with capped chaos res. But if you go for this combination in total gives you 17% of max hit, which is, let's be honest, a pretty decent amount of health. What else? You also go Unwavering for sure, because you can go Grace instead of Malevolence or Pride and not take Unwavering, but personally, Unwavering is an insane quality of life when you end up getting rushed by enemies, which happens more often when you have low damage, but can also happen in like build situations like mine, right? So I just prefer comfort of not being stunned than being occasionally stunned and maybe dying from that. So I think that's mostly it about what we have about defenses. Oh right, we have reserved life and we have only 4,800 life. For some, the way I say it only might sound weird, but you could still go for more. So I could unspec, I don't know, let's say I would unspec this, and then I could unspec these two nodes if I didn't have them. And I could, so let's actually do the experiment. So if I unspec all this, I unspec my physical damage with skills that cost life and this tech, so even less damage. Then we unspec these two things and we magically have 7 more points, which we can invest into this thing and this thing. And then magically we have 5,500 life, which, well, let's say it's a very, very good amount of life. But since I'm a softcore Andy and I love using my 6 portals to the max, I'm not doing that. But if you're someone who but prefers not dying too much, then this is the strat for you. Also, while we're at skill tree and masteries, I must say that this node for Impale is good only on Crimson Dance builds. And Crimson Dance builds, they They have left our world long time ago, so please do not even consider them as an actual thing. Some of you might ask, why don't you take more maximum physical attack damage? Well, first, I have Rislata. Not even the rolls, just Rislata. And the second thing is that those maximum damage rolls, they barely affect Puncture. Some of you may be like, well, what? What is he saying? So, these maximum amounts of damage, in PoB, they show a damage increase. But in reality, it is just a way of manipulating RNG of the damage you deal with Puncture. So realistically, overall, it does not increase your DPS. It sometimes makes it better, but it's only sometimes. So on a consistent level, it is not a reliable source of acquiring DPS. But for clearing, those things are really good, because especially with Splitting Arrow, you're most likely to attack more than once, which allows you to roll for better bleeds, which means you deal more damage with your clearing skill. And your clearing skill damage is your biggest DPS probably you ever have. Why Cruelty, you might ask? Cruelty is insanely good for... So as you can see, my Cruelty is constantly 40%. Even though my gear is cracked out of wazoo, you'll still get consistently at least 30%, which is better than most skill support gems that you could be putting into your links. So links for Puncture are pretty straightforward. It's always vicious, always deadly ailments, and always brutality. Cruelty is not an option because being reliant on the maximum amount of health of an enemy. So shortly into how Cruelty works. Cruelty effect is based on how much of the enemy max health your hit deals. So the max effect is reached at 1.4%. Okay, let's actually Google it. PoE Cruelty. Because there's 0.1 for 15% and 3.2 of the ailment threshold. And monster ailment threshold is based on life. What? Okay, no, wait, sorry, I'm getting distracted. So, since you're reliant on doing enough hit damage, which is not possible consistently with Uber and Uber bosses, that the ailments is just better. Because you don't even have to leech with your hits. Again, I mean, also about leeching. You never, ever take deadly ailments with your clearing skill. Because you just lose leech, basically. And you are kind of reliant on leech for a mana recovery. Except for finding flask, as I do sometimes. Oh wait, I forgot to switch to life flask. So, oh, also about Mirage Archer. So there's not a debate, but an unclear thing, just like with Fork and Pierce. What is better, Ballistas or Mirage Archer? I would say early on, Ballistas are better because they can tank for you. But when you get to yellow and red maps, your Ballista HP is not able to keep up with the monster damage, which makes it so that monsters just one-shot your Ballistas almost always. And even if they drag any attention, they are not as useful as, for example, having a Mirage Archer constantly shooting Ensnaring arrows. Which is, as a person who played with Ballistas only, and this is the first league I play with Mirage Archer, I would say that Mirage Archer is actually a better choice. Simply because of its ability to you just shooting once, and then it just does all the work for you. Without you having to like participate in anything, any interaction with it. So that must be actually it for the links. About Pride and Malevolence I talked already. About Quivers, I actually think I'll write all the specifics about item crafting in the notes. because I don't think there's much reason to talk about it. Even though, listen, if any content creator is watching it, I am sorry for not showing you how to craft items straight ahead. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm lazy, or am I? Wait a second. Okay, you know what? Change of plans. Let's go to my hideout. Haha. So let's talk about items. So I think there's only 2 items we should talk about. It's Quiver and Bow, because these are the only items that you'll have to participate in crafting, actually. So let's talk about Bow. Probably the most reliable way to craft a bow is to... So if you don't have a fractured one, you either find a good base, which is luck based, so we don't talk about that, or you just spam what are they called? Wait, I actually forgot the name. Deafening Essence of Contempt, and hope that you get either a big amount of percent increased physical damage or a hybrid one. After you've done that, you lock prefixes and you reforge phys on Horticrafting Station. Why phys? There's only 1 physical modifier in a suffix. And wait, no, you actually need 3 prefixes. Fuck, that doesn't work. Okay, change of plans. This bow crafting doesn't work for anything but trade. You get a 3 prefix bow, you lock prefixes, you reforge phys, you get attacks, chance to cause bleeding, and increased damage with bleeding, and then you craft multiplier. As you can see, someone came and shitted in my bow with lightning resistance and dexterity, forcing me to either annul it or recraft it completely if I fail the annul, which is why I didn't do anything with it. So that's basically for the bow. For the Quiver, your late game Quiver is damage over time multiplier with attack skills, and physical damage over time with and physical damage over time multiplier. It can be achieved in 2 ways: either RNG with reforging in Horticrafting Station with physical or attack skills, or you get a damage over time multiplier, you regal it because you spam it with alts, and then you slam Hunter Orb. If you land what you need, congratulations, you won. But if you didn't, wah, 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 wah. What I actually did, I bought a Quiver because it seems like nobody knows about it and no one plays Bleed Glad, or just Bleed Bow. I mean, sorry. So what you do is you put cannot roll attack mods, and since cannot roll attack mods is a suffix, it actually fills all suffixes, which means that you cannot let any attack suffix, and only prefixes that there are increased damage with bow skills, life, movement speed hunter mod, and pierce hunter mod, which ends up in you slamming exalts and hoping to get good tiers. If you don't land what you want, so for example, I slam once. Oh wait, I can actually show you that. Craft of Exile. We go to emulator. Who the fuck is... Oh, sorry. Okay, we go to emulator. Create new item. Where's the offhand? Offhand, Quiver. Let's take the attack speed one. Where is it? Attack speed level 86. Hunter. Let's say we have over time. We have physical damage over time and generic over time. So what we do is cannot troll, yeah. Cannot roll attack modifiers, as you can see it's suffix. So suffixes are filled. And doing exalt slam. Life, let's say 70 life is okay for me. Then I slam again. If you get pierce as a bleed glad, you have to put suffixes cannot be changed in annul. You might annul this mod, so it's a 50. It's not a 50-50, but you can annul this mod and you'll have to keep going. So it's a very divine hungry craft, but it's still very consistent in making the best bow you can actually have. So then we put cannot craft again. Not cannot craft, but cannot roll attack mods. Then we slam exalt. Good life. Damage with both skills. Let's say it's a good one, but please do not slam one more exalt. When you have all these prefixes, you have a chance of fucking up your bow. You might ask, how? If you land projectile spears, like here, you cannot lock suffixes, but you have a modifier that breaks your build. So the maximum that you can actually get, the maximum best, is tier 1 life, tier 1 damage with both skills, then craft attack speed and a suffix, and then you're done. Not even slamming, you're just done. You have a prefix, but your risk with fucking it up. So that's how you craft the quiver. It's very expensive, and it's actually best in slot quiver with these mods. And I think that's it about gear. Yeah, that's mostly it. Is there anything I forgot to talk about? Maloney's mechanism. Maloney's mechanism is really good because it removes most of your problems with socket hunger, because you can put Ensnaring arrow and frenzy and like any skill that you really need, like flame dash, just blood rage, anything like that. So you have 3 more slots, sockets. So it removes a lot of pressure. But Maloney's mechanism is mostly a trade thing, as well as it doesn't have stats except for life and attack speed, which might be a problem since you need a lot of dexterity. So as you can see, my amulet is actually the thing that is carrying my dexterity. Because Bleed Glad and Bleed Champion, Bleed Bow Glad and Bleed Bow Champion are very hungry for dexterity, and you have 2 options. Okay, 3. You get dexterity on rings, you get dexterity on amulet, and you get dexterity on quiver. You can actually get dexterity on boots and gloves with the essence, but it's still a less optimal solution, in my opinion, than it is to get it on quiver or amulet. Because on quiver, you don't really need any suffixes at all. Well, prefixes is where your damage comes, and life. So you get life, damage with both skills, and generic damage over time multiplier with attack skills. Which means that you have a suffix for dexterity and resistance. According to my calculations, with this modifier, you deal 120% more damage with Rain of Arrows compared to Split Arrow, and you deal 190% more damage with Toxic Rain compared to Split Arrow. So this mod alone makes Bleed Bow Glad able to do Simulacrum Wave 30. Before that, no matter what you do, even if you took Puncture instead of Split Arrow, there was nothing you can do to pass further than the Wave 34 or 23 or 24. I spent a lot of time testing it. It's impossible. But this actually makes you deal 3 times more damage with your clearing skill, which actually allows you to do some luck Wave 30. The only problem is that Split Arrow is still better for clearing. And by the time you get this modifier, you have enough damage for clearing. Except if you get prepared for it, and you prefer Rain of Arrows, you know, stuff like that. Also, a useful thing would be Life Tap as a support gem for your bow, which gives you a decent amount of damage because it gives more damage when you have Life Tap, or when you spend enough life. But in my opinion, physical, especially physical and chaos and quality, is still better than Life Tap, because it also affects your physical damage over time multiplier craft and your increased damage with bleeding. So that must be actually it about anything you have to talk. There aren't really any mechanics I should cover, right? Yeah, that is it. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked it and found something that you didn't know and that is going to be useful for you. And remember, you can always leave a comment and ask me about something, because I really want to help people enjoy Bleed Bow Glad and Bleed Bow Champion, and even Bleed Bow Deadeye, which is shit, but if you really want, I'll be glad to help you figure it out, fix mistakes, and make it an enjoyable experience overall for you. So stay sane, Exiles. Have a nice day.